Have a seat, Gypsy. In fact, have several seats at this point. What's up, everyone? Carolina Girl here. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Salty Carolina Girl on TikTok. It is Tuesday, August 4th, 2026. I hope everyone's had a great weekend and a great start to your work week. And I know it's been a while since I've made any Gypsy Rose content, and that's because the summertime rolled around and got me. Usually I have a lot of work to do in the summertime, and so I don't have a lot of time to prepare videos to the extent Gypsy's videos are usually. And so unfortunately, I've been away a little bit, but now that summertime is winding down, I'll probably be back trying to make some Gypsy Rose content. But I'm coming to you today because while I've been away, I've still been online over there on TikTok, like in the evening times, and I listen to the chatter. And there's been two things that I wanted to try to address, and it had to do with the fact of Gypsy possibly having cancer, and the fact that, they think that a lot of people think Mike done some underhanded things and stuff to try to get Gypsy's plea deal and blah, blah, blah. And so I wanted to talk to you about those two things. Now, the medical stuff, I'm not medical, but I feel like just common sense wise, I can kind of look at this stuff and talk about it. I'm more legal minded than anything. But as far as the cancer is concerned, and Dr. Robert Steele, he was Gypsy's pediatrician in Missouri when they got to Springfield, Missouri, or not when they got to Springfield, but when they got to Springfield or Missouri, period, excuse me, that he started, he was her pediatrician from 2005, I guess, up until she aged out, which would have been right before the murders, because her fake age, she was 19, or saying she was 19, but technically she was 23, and that's at the time of the crime. And so I imagine he would have been treating her up until the age of 18. I'm not sure. That's just my assumption there. But anyway, let's introduce Dr. Robert Steele to you guys.
Okay. Wow. Endocrine, neurology, ophthalmology, allergy, immunology. I've never seen any of this information. And I saw her a lot. I'm Dr. Rob Steele, and I became Gypsy's pediatrician back in 2005. She was 14 at the time.
Now, the thing about this clip at the beginning, he's flipping through those medical records and he's naming all the specialists that she had seen. And, he's flipping through them. And the two specialists that I didn't hear were oncologist or hematologist. Oncology is, of course, cancer, and hematology has to do with blood. But see, leukemia is a blood cancer. And so if she would have had cancer or leukemia, then there would have been a hematologist involved and an oncologist. I'm not sure if there's a hematologist-oncologist, but there would have at least been a hematologist and an oncologist involved in her treatment if she had leukemia. And when he's flipping through those medical records, you don't hear him say oncologist or hematologist. He lists just about every other specialty or specialist but those. And so let me play that for you one more time.
Okay, wow. Endocrine, neurology, ophthalmology, allergy, immunology. I've never seen any of this information. And I saw her a lot.
And so, I feel like there would be something there with oncology or hematology or something, and there's not. And then with him being her pediatrician from 2005 on, for the most part, because, I don't know if she aged out, if they started going by her real age with him or not, or if they were still playing the, changing the age game or whatever with him. But, if he was her pediatrician from 2005 on, let me just play this next clip for you, because this is him talking about her and possible cancer.
Dee Dee didn't have the medical records. She said they're gone because it was chaos down in New Orleans right after Katrina. So Dee Dee became the sole place for information. Probably the biggest concern I had was just this history of cancer. Dee Dee could not give either the diagnosis nor really the length of treatment that she had been on. That was unusual. And to me, that was a red flag. So the question is, at what point do you trust the parent to be accurate with the information? Can I trust what Dee Dee's telling me? When Dee Dee and Gypsy came up from New Orleans with no concrete medical records previously, I have to assess the information that Dee Dee's giving me. But she didn't remember the cancer diagnosis. So we tested, and guess what? Test came back normal. We felt like there was no evidence of cancer. Well, maybe she's in remission. Then when Dee Dee said she's got a muscular problem, at least from the outset, it looks like, well, maybe she does. She's in a wheelchair.
Okay, let me stop it there. So, like I said, with him being her pediatrician, he tested her and everything came back normal. So as far as he was concerned, she was in remission. Now, after that, had anything, come up to where something was wrong, I mean, he would have been the one that would have been the referring physician. I would assume, him being her pediatrician, he would be the one that would be referring her out to these other specialists, such as oncology or hematology or whoever she would have needed to go to. But according to him, it doesn't sound like that's what happened. According to him, to his knowledge, she never had cancer, and had she ever been diagnosed after that point, I would think that he would know that. And so, I mean, just by watching this, I am under the impression that she did not have cancer. Or, and if she did, and he wasn't aware, then I have to question something there, because like I said, he's her pediatrician. He should have knowledge of that. I mean, you would think the oncologists and the hematologists would be reporting back to him, since he would have been the referring physician. But like I said, I'm not medical, but that's just my opinion. But let's keep going, because this part kind of takes us into my next part, because this guy, Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein, was Gypsy's keep me out of prison for the rest of my life card.
As I examined her, there wasn't real obvious things that suggested muscular disorders. So I was really frustrated. And so that's when I referred Gypsy to see a neurologist.
My name is Bernardo Flasterstein. I'm a pediatric neurologist, and I met Gypsy Rose after they just had moved to Springfield, Missouri. She came with multiple medical conditions, but Dee Dee was not willing or able to give details about each one of the diagnoses. So I said, let's do new tests. We did an MRI of the spine and the brain. When I got the results, they were all normal. Gypsy Rose didn't have cerebral palsy. Her muscles are good, her strength is good, and I think that she should be able to walk. This is great news. And then I tried to have her move and stand her up, and lo and behold, she was able to stand up.
Dr. Flasterstein said that your MRI results were normal, and he said that he asked you to stand up, and lo and behold, you stood up.
I don't recall that ever happening. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying that I know for damn sure if I would have stood up in any office, I would have had my ass chewed out. And that didn't happen.
Dee Dee was not happy and got upset, took Gypsy by the wheelchair, and she stormed out of the room. I was sitting there, I was amazed.
I think the reason why Dee Dee got upset is because of the fact that, Gypsy keeps telling her in privacy that, she can't walk, she can't do this, or, she has trouble. Not that she can't walk, but she has trouble walking. Or maybe it has to do with leg strength. I'm not quite sure. She was telling Dee Dee something, because Dee Dee was bound and determined this girl had muscular dystrophy. And we already know by the videos that have come out through the FOIA request that on May 14th, 2014, she sends Nick a video telling him she could walk. She showed him where she could stand and walk, and she said that she kept it from her mother from the time she was 6 years old until the time she was 19 years old. So for 13 years, Gypsy kept herself in the wheelchair because she was telling her mom, she had to be telling her mom something, that she either didn't have enough strength to walk, like normal or what have you. But that's, that's Gypsy's words. I still got the video. It's on my YouTube page, and it's probably on my TikTok page. But the video's there. Those are Gypsy's words, not mine. And that's before the public ever got involved. See, that was the private video between her and Nick, where she's telling him she could stand and walk, and that she didn't tell her mom for 13 years that she could walk, that she got the feeling back in her legs after some kind of procedure she had when she was 6 years old. And that was a private message between her and Nick. And we surely haven't heard that story. And as far as the public's concerned, that story was going to stay hidden had we not requested, through the FOIA request, those videos. That story would have stayed hidden. We would have never heard that story. And, all we've heard is the public story. What she put out to the media to make herself try to look good and make her mom the villain. Because keeping it from her mom that she can walk for 13 years, that's surely not innocent, is it? No, it's not. So she couldn't tell that to the public. So she had to make her mom the villain. And that's what she did there. And, instead of calling this man a liar, Gypsy, as far as Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein, you should be kissing his ass, because he kept you out of prison for the rest of your life. Had he not made that little note in the records, the medical records, about, suspecting Munchausen's by proxy, your butt would still be sitting in Chillicothe. And I would bet $100 on that. I would bet you $100 on that you'd still be sitting in Chillicothe had Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein not put that little one-liner in the medical records. And so this next clip I want to show you, we're gonna kind of head into that was my lead into the legal aspects of it. Like I said, Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein is the one that kept Gypsy out of prison for the rest of her life. And so, as Mike was going through these medical documents, they saw that line in the medical documents, and that's what they ran with. And a lot of people, this is what I mean by the chatter that I've been hearing, and Mike doing underhanded things and stuff. Some people think that he went through the medical records and scrubbed anything that had to do with cancer, scrubbed all those records. And I don't believe that. I don't believe she had cancer, not as a child. Because like I said, Dr. Steele, he would have known that. And he says, she was in remission when she first got up here. She was in remission, and he didn't say anything else about her having cancer. And so, like I said, I assume she did not have cancer. And so I think that these little notes that people are seeing in the medical records, that's in the notes section, I think that has to do with the intake nurses and the nurses taking the information when they first come in. It's either by DD or Gypsy, and they're saying, patient has previous history of cancer, and it's just the C word. It's not even a medical terminology, as far as the actual medical terminology of the cancer itself or whatever, because it's not just cancer, and they're not just going to list cancer. It's going to be the medical terminology, whatever type of cancer they have, because there's all kinds of cancers. And so they'd be more specific than just cancer, CANCER. And that's just my opinion there as well. Like I said, I'm not medical, I'm more legal. And so this next part of my video is my thing. But this is Mike talking about, like Munchausen. They're going through the records and pointing out to Rod and Christie, for like the mitigating circumstances or the mitigating evidence of the case per se.
Basically, each one of these paper clips is some medical record where...
Let me start it back. And so the prosecution is asking for mitigating evidence, okay? And so I want to show you what mitigating evidence is. It says Mitigation evidence is typically introduced during the sentencing phase of a trial, particularly criminal cases. Its primary purpose is to establish the presence of mitigating circumstances that can lead to a more lenient sentence. This evidence aims to show that the defendant is less deserving of a harsh punishment than the prosecution claims. Types of mitigation evidence. Mitigation evidence can take various forms, including but not limited to personal history, information about the defendant's background, such as childhood experiences, family dynamics, and social economic status, mental health issues, evidence of mental health conditions that may have influenced the defendant's behavior at the time of the offense, character references, testimonies from the family members, friends, or colleagues that highlight the defendant's good character and contributions to the community, and remorse and rehabilitation. Evidence showing that the defendant has taken steps toward rehabilitation, such as attending counseling or treatment programs, can be persuasive. And so, like I said, for his mitigation evidence, it was those documents, the medical documents showing where Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein said, he suspected Munchausen's by proxy. And then, of course, you got the personal and mental health. I'm going to put those two together because here, they were, when the case first broke, they were looking for a handicapped, wheelchair-bound, sickly individual that could have had some mental delays, but that's not what they arrested. And so, and then, like the personal background, her staying in the wheelchair and just all that jazz. That all helped her case. And so the character references would be, the people in Missouri. The people in Missouri just love Dee Dee and Gypsy. And so, talking to the people in New Orleans, they just crucified Dee Dee. They had nothing good to say about Dee Dee as far as the New Orleans people, but the Missouri people just love Dee Dee and Gypsy. And those are probably who I would say talked the most, because that's where they spent the majority of their time, right there before the crime happened. And then remorse and rehabilitation, we know Gypsy could put it on. And she put on that baby voice, and she just went to work, and so she was able to probably get past them there, because as far as rehabilitation, she really hadn't had time to do anything at that point. It had only been a year since the crime, and I don't know how much the jailhouse has to offer you versus prison, and as far as mental health and all that jazz. So she's not really rehabilitated, but as far as the remorse part of it, like I said, I'm sure she pretty much played the part. And so let's go back to Mike's video real quick.
Basically, each one of these paper clips is some medical record where Dee Dee essentially lied to the doctor about something. Mentally, Gypsy is behind. She's at the level of a 7-year-old on mother's information. And this is seen. I managed to talk to one of her previous providers. She specifically remembers Gypsy Rose and mentioned that her previous neurologist clearly reported the fact that Gypsy does not have muscular dystrophy. Analyzing all the facts, and after talking to her previous pediatrician, there's a strong possibility of Munchausen by proxy, with maybe some underlying unknown etiology to explain her symptoms.
And so that line right there was Gypsy's "keep me out of prison for the rest of my life" card. And so I don't know if you guys, if you're my age, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you're younger, you probably don't. But there was a movie back in the day, back in the 70s, I'm wanting to say it was, called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And little Charlie, they would wrap golden tickets in chocolate bars. And every day, little Charlie, he was too poor to buy a chocolate bar, but he would go to the candy shop and he'd watch all these kids go and buy the candy bars, looking for that golden ticket. And he was walking home one day, and he just happened to look down in one of them sewer crates, down in the street, and he could see a Wonka bar wrapper, and it looked like a gold, like a shimmering like gold. And so he worked until he was able to fish that wrapper out of the sewer, and it happened to be a golden ticket. And that golden ticket let him go to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And he was just so happy. He took it home to his grandpa. And they just danced and danced and danced because they were going to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. I guarantee you, when Mike found this piece of paper and that medical record, him and his paralegals were probably dancing all around the office, because this was their golden ticket. This was their golden ticket to get their client either off or a deal. One of the two. And so this is what has to be, presented or, like shared, because a lot of people are under the impression that Mike held some information back from the prosecution and all this stuff to gain this plea deal. And the paper, pretty much, I think the stack of papers that you saw in his hand during that video, that's probably what he presented to the prosecution. And so not everything has to be disclosed right away, though. Now, had they gone to trial, if they wouldn't have been able to work out a plea deal, and had they gone to trial, then yes, you have to disclose a lot more than what you just working on a plea deal. With the plea deal, you just have to, change your, or provide your mitigating evidence. And like I said, that mitigating evidence for Mike was that stack of papers that was in his hand that he was going over with Rod and Christie. And, presenting a sob story to go along with that stack of papers, basically. But in the U.S. criminal law, the defense does not have to disclose everything to the prosecution when working on a plea deal. But there are important limits on what the defense can keep secret. What the defense must share. Under reciprocal discovery rules, the defense is generally required to turn over certain evidence or information to the prosecution before trial, such as physical documents or exhibits the defense intends to use, which would have been that stack of papers that he was showing Christie and Rod. Expert records or forensic results. At this time, I don't think there would have been really any expert reports or forensic results unless it would have been having to do with like testing her for her IQ and her mental capacities, something like that. But I don't think there would have been a whole lot of expert reports or forensic results at this time. And alibi witnesses or other potential witnesses. If the defense withholds such information, the court can exclude it at trial, and the prosecution may be able to move for a dismissal of the case. What the defense can keep secret, the defense is not obligated to share all information with the prosecution. This includes internal strategy discussions, unshared evidence or witness information not intended for trial, and information that could be used to protect the defendant's rights or interests. And so, I think a lot of people don't understand how the legal process works, especially when you're trying to get a plea deal versus going to trial and such. And so I'm trying to help everybody understand, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there right now going around about how Mike obtained the plea deal and such. I know people aren't happy with that. I know they're not. But don't be mad at Mike for doing his job. Mike did his job, people. He's a public defender, defense attorney, and they're supposed to jump through hoops and do juggling acts to try to get the best deal possible for their client. And that's what Mike did here. I don't think he did anything underhanded. And I know that's not the popular opinion. But the truth is, if you were a defendant, I don't care if you were Gypsy Rose or not, just if you were a defendant, period, and you're facing first-degree murder, you would want that man doing whatever he could to get you the best deal possible. Jump through hoops, do juggling acts, whatever it took. I'm sure you would want the best deal possible. I can't see you saying now, I don't want you holding anything back, even if it's going to convict me. I would say you're going to sit there and want that man to do whatever he could to try to get you off, or at least a lesser sentence. And so, it's not just about Gypsy here. If you try to take her rights, you're taking your own rights too. Really, when you look at it, when you sit here and you try to ignore something, or you try to bend the law or bend the rules because you're trying to get a certain narrative for Gypsy, you're hurting yourself too. You really are. And so, what reciprocal discovery is what is exchanged. While rules vary by jurisdiction, reciprocal discovery typically includes witness list and statements, exculpatory and inculpatory evidence, physical evidence, expert reports, alibi notices, plea offers, or stipulations. And this is what a judge normally sees, during a plea deal. Okay, and this is how a judge bases his decision on whether or not he signs off on the plea deal or not. So when a plea deal is presented to a judge, the judge will consider the following factors: Nature of the charge. The judge will evaluate the seriousness of the charges against the defendant. Well, it was first-degree murder, and they were asking for it to be dropped down to second-degree murder. Criminal history. The judge will assess the defendant's prior criminal record and any relevant evidence about the defendant's character. And so criminal history, she had none. She did not have a prior criminal history. And so that helped big time in her favor. I'm sure that helped, the judge determine whether he would sign that plea deal or not. In the case circumstances, the judge will review the facts and circumstances of the crimes, including the defendant's role in the offense, whether she had remorse or not, and then the harm that was caused. And so we all know her role. She was the mastermind. And whether she has remorse or not, I don't believe she has any remorse, but she plays the part when she needs to. And she turns that baby voice on and does what she needs to do. So she plays the part when it comes to, and she knows when she needs to turn that on. And then as far as the harm caused, she took Dee Dee's life, but technically it wasn't her, it was Nick. And then, victims' wishes. In some jurisdictions, victims may express their wishes to the judge before the judge accepts or rejects the plea bargain. She spoke to the judge, but I don't think she really expressed any wishes. I think she just answered his questions for the most part, if I remember correctly. Public interest. The judge will consider the interest of the public, including whether the proposed sentence would keep the community safe, being she didn't have a prior criminal history and such. The judge took that into consideration, but also for the public interest, even though people didn't support Gypsy's crime, they didn't support her crime. They supported her because they thought she was an abuse victim. They were believing that story that was put out to the media. And so she did have a lot of support at that time, believe it or not. And I know it's hard, because now it seems like a lot of people have turned against her. But back then, she had a lot of support still because they all believed her story. They all thought she was abused. And so this is before she was able to really give any interviews and all that stuff. Once she started giving her interviews and contradicting herself, then people started changing their mind about her. But so this is all pre everything, and so she did have a lot of support. And it goes back to the George Zimmerman case back out of Florida. When that case happened, the prosecution, I don't think the prosecution was ever going to charge that man, but public interest demanded. The public, demanded that man be charged because they thought he was, guilty of a crime. And so finally they brought in a special prosecutor on the case and charged him, but he ended up being acquitted of the case. And that whole thing was a mess, even down, to right before the jury came back with their verdict. I felt like, they should have explained to the jury what second degree, I don't know if it was second degree murder or manslaughter, but they wouldn't explain to the jury what those charges were. And had they explained, I believe that they would have convicted him on one of those charges, but they wouldn't explain it to the jury. And so they acquitted him. But that's another thing. But there was public interest in that case. And like I said, the only reason why that man was charged is because of the public outrage. And legal considerations. The judge will ensure that the plea deal is in the best interest of justice and that the defendant voluntarily agreed to the plea deal. The judge's decision is based on the factors and is not influenced by the defendant's character or any evidence about the defendant's past behavior. And so, but that's how they determine, whether or not they're going to sign off on the plea deal. And the fact that, she sits there meek and mild with that baby voice and all that. And then the fact that she didn't have a criminal history. And then, you have to look at the fact that, hold on, I don't want to get ahead of myself. This is Dan Patterson that's going to be talking about the plea deal and what he kind of looked at, I guess, to sign off on the plea deal himself.
This case is unusual and extraordinary. Gypsy Blanchard endured nearly 2 decades of systematic, purposeful abuse at the hands of her mother for the purpose of fraud. And so by amending to murder in the second degree, we were able to both hold Gypsy Blanchard accountable for the murder, which was not justified nor excusable, but yet account for those mitigating circumstances.
And in another interview. It wasn't him. It was the assistant district attorney. I think his name is Nathan Green. He gave an interview for Snap Killer Couples, and he said that Gypsy's case was the worst child abuse case in Missouri history. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what he said. But I'd like to see the evidence to back that. Do you have evidence to really back that? I mean, how can you call it the worst child abuse case in history if you don't have any kind of evidence to back that claim? Are you going by the medical abuse? Because if so, had you done your work, guys, you would have realized that she had a microdeletion, and a lot of the symptoms that she was being treated for when she was younger were symptoms of the microdeletion that hadn't been discovered yet. The microdeletion, wasn't discovered until 2011. And after 2011, if I'm not mistaken, the doctor's appointments lessened. And even, some were canceled. Some doctor's appointments were even canceled. They didn't follow. And, that big old neck surgery or the throat surgery where they were talking about she was talking about her voice surgery. That was the last straw. She just knew that was going to be the end of her if she had that surgery. And so she had to take her mom out because she was going to have that surgery. That consult was canceled. Not only did the surgery not happen, but Dee Dee canceled the consult as well. So the appointment never even happened. And so that's a lie regarding Gypsy, why Gypsy did what she did. It had nothing to do with that appointment because it was canceled. But, this is what they were looking for when this case first broke. This is what they were looking for. They were looking for a sick, wheelchair-bound, handicapped girl with mental disability. But that's not what they arrested. What they arrested was this. And so obviously the DA was sitting there looking at this like, okay, what's wrong with this picture? She's not in a wheelchair. She can walk. She can do this, She looks pretty normal to me at this point. And so obviously something was going on there. And they were able to work with, Facebook, Christy, Bobby. And it's funny, Bobby didn't have anything to do with Dee Dee and Gypsy the whole time they were gone away from New Orleans. But boy, Dee Dee got murdered. He come out of the woodwork. He just knew everything. Hadn't talked to him in years, but he knew everything. Isn't that funny? So they jumped on all these Facebook groups and got this narrative together of how Dee Dee was a big meanie head and she was doing this and she was abusing Gypsy and she was faking the illnesses. And come to find out, that's not true. That's not true. All that's been debunked. It really has. And so, my challenge for anybody like Bree, Gypsy, anybody out there, if you have something that will exonerate you, Gypsy, or Bree, if you have something that will exonerate Gypsy, I challenge you to post it. I would imagine you would have done so already if you had something that would exonerate her and debunk everything that we've said. Because I like to provide proof with my videos and stuff and to back up what I say. And I use Gypsy's words against her. And so if you have something that debunks anything I've said, please post it. I ask you, I beg you, please post it. Especially if it's going to exonerate your friend. I mean, this could have been over 2.5 years ago if you would have just posted the things that you say you have to exonerate her, but you haven't posted it yet. My question is why? It would either be it doesn't exist or y'all just like all this attention. So I don't know. What is it? Anyway, that's what I wanted to come and talk to you guys about today. And, I don't know if Gypsy had cancer or not, but just by going by with what Dr. Steele was saying and stuff, I don't think she did, not as a child. Because I would think he'd be aware of it. He might not have been aware of it before, but if she had it after moving to Missouri, I would think he'd be aware of it. And he didn't act like she had cancer. He did not say she had cancer. In fact, he said he tested her and she was in remission. And then as far as the legalities of her case, I hope I was able to explain that to you as well. And the fact that, when you're working out a plea deal, you don't have to turn everything over to the prosecution. You're only going to hand him, what you plan on using, and the mitigating circumstances, which would be that one document that says she had, they suspected Munchausen's by proxy, and then all the medical documents to kind of support that, as far as the test coming back normal and this, that, and the other. But like I said, had they gone to trial, then that would be a different story. I mean, all the medical records would have to be turned over, and everything would basically have to be turned over to the defense, especially, to the prosecution, especially if the defense planned on using it during trial. And so it's just a different scenario there. And so Mike didn't really do anything underhanded, and he really did do his job. And I know people don't like to hear that, but I'm trying to be straight up with you guys, and I'm trying to tell you how the law works. And the fact is, this isn't just about Gypsy, it's about everybody. Because if you try to go bending the law and taking things away, because you want it to fit a certain narrative with Gypsy, you're actually hurting yourself as well. And so don't try to cut your nose off to spite, because I don't know. I hear everybody talking about the law and stuff, and it's kind of surprises me how many people don't really know their rights, and they don't know, and it's probably a good thing if you don't know how legal proceedings work. The only reason why I know is because I was in the legal field for 8 years, and so I kind of know how it works. But for those that don't, it's probably a good thing, because that shows that you've never been in trouble and you never had to go through these proceedings and stuff. And so, but a lot of people don't know how it works, and so I'm hoping I'm just able to explain it to you guys. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and I will be coming to you again soon with another video. We've got some prison phone calls coming out, and so I'm trying to track them down and trying to find the source, so that way when I do make some videos, I can credit the person that needs to be credited. And so yeah, so be looking forward to some more videos. These are going to be this next one that I do is probably going to be a little extensive, so I've got to do some research as far as emails and texts and stuff like that. And so just be looking out for another video to come soon. And I want everybody to take care. And as always, I appreciate everybody that supports my channels, whether it's TikTok or YouTube. I'm not monetized, but just hit that like button and subscribe button. I appreciate your support, because without you guys, I wouldn't have a channel. And so, like I said, I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Be looking for another video to come out, and I hope to see you guys soon. Y'all take care.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, my attorneys, even that, I haven't been completely honest with them. So